Like many parents, I have spent hundreds of hours watching my children play sports. I was once at a soccer game that was typical of 10-year-olds. The kids were all over the field, and at any given point, you had no idea who had the ball. During halftime, an exasperated parent turned to me and said, "These games are a waste of our time. It's not like any of these kids are ever going to go play professional sports." By itself, this story is not unique. These games literally play themselves out dozens of times a day. But what is unique, and frankly frightening, is that we've come to expect a World Cup soccer performance out of a game played by little kids. And we're sending our children the message that when they don't deliver that performance, they shouldn't bother to play at all. Now, statistically, the parent is right. Far less than 1% of high school or college athletes will ever go on to a professional sports career. But statistics aside, this is a really great example of how we have let our obsession with perfection, known as the nirvana fallacy, permeate our thinking. The nirvana fallacy is not new. It dates back to the 1700s, and it was made famous by Voltaire's counter-argument that perfect is the enemy of the good. It's got a fancy academic definition, but it's really easily understood by a quote that we've likely all heard and some of us have said. If I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm here today as a reformed perfectionist, as someone who advocates for the pursuit of good enough. Now, we could argue, if we all know that perfection is an illusion, why bother to discuss this at all? I argue that we think the opposite. We think that perfect is not only possible, but probable. And that by fixating on that perfect end state, we've lost our ability to negotiate incremental gains. My conversion to a reformed perfectionist happened many years ago at Madison Square Garden. I was a professional athlete. And one year, I qualified to run in the indoor track and field championships. The event was well attended, it was televised, and as a long-distance runner, I was in awesome shape. I came in dead last. For the next couple of days, I obsessed about my performance, until finally my coach reminded me, "Charly, you were one of 8 who qualified. Isn't that good enough?" Now, although this is a personal story, it resonates beyond me. We don't have to look very far to recognize how obsessed our culture is with perfection. The term Photoshop is tweeted hundreds of times a day. We spend billions of dollars every year in search of flat abs and shiny white teeth. And although these are superficial goals, if we look deeper at the nirvana fallacy, we'll find areas that it has dangerously impacted parts of our world that are really important. Soon after my race at the Garden, a researcher by the name of Bob Goldman did a survey of elite athletes. He asked them if they would be willing to take a drug that guaranteed them a gold medal, but that would kill them within 5 years. Over 50% of the athletes said yes. Goldman was shocked at those results, and to make sure that he had accurate data, he repeated the survey another 5 times over the next decade with exactly the same results. So I'm going to ask you a question. If we really think that perfection is an illusion, how do we explain why 50% of elite athletes are willing to die in exchange for that one perfect performance? The nirvana fallacy has impact in other areas as well, in that it's creating cultures where we are afraid to fail. Nowhere has this been more evident than in the recent Volkswagen scandal. Executives and engineers were so obsessed with perfect car performance that they knowingly installed subpar emission software. That corrupt quest for perfection is going to cost Volkswagen billions of dollars, and it has already cost many people their entire career. The irony of that scandal is it could have been completely avoided if they had been willing to pursue good enough. But perhaps nowhere is the negative impact of our obsession with perfect more evident than on a set of systems that may be irreparable. Public policy requires compromise, and compromise requires letting go of perfect. The United States is a country that was formed on the quest for good enough. It says it in the first line of our Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. We didn't come here looking for perfect, we came looking for better. But over the past 5 or 6 decades, our democracy has frankly been floundering. Our political system is becoming increasingly held hostage to small groups who are intent on implementing their version of ideological perfection. This is the nirvana fallacy at its most dangerous and its most extreme. Because these groups are so intent on winning that they have a reckless disregard for the impact of their actions. We only have to think back to 2013 to remember that the federal government was shut down for, I think, 15 or 16 days, all because we were unwilling to compromise on a key piece of legislation. That shutdown cost taxpayers $24 billion. Now, these are American examples, but if we look in today's paper, we'll find where similar challenges are happening around the globe: Japan, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, and some of the Scandinavian countries. So, where do we go from here? I've had 25 years to practice the pursuit of good enough, and because I am so competitive, I've needed the time. Last November, I ran for public office, and I came in last. Rather than obsessing about what didn't happen, I instead focused on the fact that my candidacy opened up a conversation about a really important public issue. If we get back to our tiny soccer players and we include all of our children, we can make a huge step forward by giving our kids a break. The pressures that our children feel from sports pale in comparison to the social and academic pressures they face as they grow up in a globally complex world. If we give our children permission to pursue good enough, we will grow adults who, as the future CEOs and political leaders, are willing to compromise. Corporations can make a huge change by moving away from cultures of fear and moving towards cultures of innovation. Some 300 years later, Voltaire is right still. Perfect is the enemy of the good. It is urgent that we acknowledge this now and that we change the way we think and we change the way that we behave. Because if we look at every major issue impacting our planet, from climate change to pandemics, from economic inequality to the very future of our democracy, all of those would benefit from decision-making that is good enough. Thank you.